She blames austerity, Brexit, and the ongoing impact of Liz Truss's mini budget for the fact she's going to put up taxes. What do you think about that?
What a load of utter bollocks.
With the Bank of England, though, for example, surely it's better. I would trust an expert in banking and finance than a politician.
Well, that makes you part of the globalist elite.
Oh,
basically,
wow.
JJ, you're part of the problem.
You sound like you've been listening to the Joe Rogan Experience far too much. That's what you sound like.
People overseas think, what the hell is going on in Britain? You know, why are comedians being arrested at the airport? I mean, you're laughing, but it's like it's Soviet Union stuff. I mean, it's just absolutely nuts.
Welcome to a very special edition of the Daily Expresso. I'm JJ Anisiobi, and today we're joined by a woman who remains one of the most talked about figures in modern politics. Liz Truss lasted just 49 days in number 10, but her time in office left a mark that's still being debated across Westminster and beyond. In today's episode, we'll talk about her life as Prime Minister, what really went wrong, and whether she regrets sacking Kwasi Kwarteng, and if she still blames others for her downfall. Liz, thank you for joining us here on Daily Expresso.
Good to be on the show.
What's life like now after Downing Street?
I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that question. I mean, life is great. Life is great.
How do people?
I always enjoy life.
How do people react to you when they see you walk down the street?
So quite a lot of people say, "I'm sorry about what happened to you as Prime Minister. You were right." I get that reaction quite a lot, actually. Okay. Other people are rude lefties. So those are the two categories.
And what do the rude lefties say to you?
Well, they just shout stuff about Gaza or whatever. And,
right.
You know, it's...
And what's keeping you busy nowadays?
Well, I'm still busy on what I was always busy on, which is how do we actually make Britain a successful country, and how do we get out of the morass that we're in.
Well, let's talk about the issues at the moment. The budget's only a few weeks away. This is what Chancellor Rachel Reeves has said. She blames austerity, Brexit, and the ongoing impact of Liz Truss's mini budget for the fact she's going to put up taxes. What do you think about that?
What a load of utter bollocks. I mean, honestly, you know, let's be honest. This country has not been doing well for 30 years. Mm-hmm. That's how long this has been going on. You know, we have not had industry grow. You know, we've had people leaving the country because they can't make money here, frankly. We've had people's incomes haven't really risen if you take account of inflation for over a decade. And this stuff from Labour is just like desperate. It's desperate because they basically realise that their policies don't work, that their whole critique of the Tory government was wrong, because if you remember, they said the Tory government didn't spend enough money and they didn't put taxes up enough. Actually, the Tory government spent too much money and put up taxes too much. And most of the problems go right back to the Blair era. You know, they go back to making the Bank of England unaccountable. They go back to all the regulation that Blair put on business. They go back to all the public spending that Gordon Brown did. And the big failing of the Tories was to not deal with that. And so Rachel Reeves is in a massive hole of her own making, and she's just casting around for people and things to blame. And I think the public realise this. This is why, you know, she is the most unpopular Chancellor on record. Keir Starmer is the most unpopular Prime Minister. It's why Labour Party won 15% in the polls, because people aren't stupid.
So how do you compare the impact of your mini budget to what Labour are currently doing?
Well, it's a totally different situation, because my mini budget was never implemented. Mm-hmm. This is what people don't understand, that what happened was, at the time in 2022, the Bank of England effectively sabotaged it. So the day before the mini budget, they announced the sale of £40 billion worth of government gilts. They failed to properly regulate the pension market, which created the run over the next few days in the gilt market. And in fact, the Bank of England themselves admitted that 2/3 of all the market changes in 2022 were down to them. Mm-hmm. Of course, that doesn't get reported in the mainstream media, which is basically a mouthpiece for the economic establishment. But the fact is, you know, it was a Bank of England caused crisis. and they pointed the finger at me. It was convenient for people in the Conservative Party that wanted Rishi Sunak to be installed to point the finger at me, and that's what happened. But it's ludicrous to blame the mini budget, which wasn't implemented, for where we are now. And we go back to what is the fundamental problem with Britain. The fundamental problem is the economy hasn't really grown significantly for 30 years. That's the problem. That's why we're... And if you compare us to America, so in the year 2000, the average Brit was just about as well off as the average American. Now, American income per capita is 50% higher than British income per capita. 50% higher. Can you imagine what your life would be like if your salary was 50% bigger? That's true for everybody. That's the scale.
But there's other things that Americans having to pay for that we don't pay for. You don't have to pay for dental here. You don't have to pay health insurance here. Americans they have other
but we
costs.
pay through the tax system.
Yeah,
we pay through the tax system.
We pay through the tax system, but the Americans are also paying taxes as well.
You've got to understand that the private public sector thing over here. This is about the amount of income the country is bringing in per head. They're bringing in 50% more income per head. That means they can, if they want, they could spend it in the public sector or the private sector. But the point is they're bringing in 50% more income. And that makes a massive difference. And that is where the problem is. And you've got to ask, why are the Americans bringing in 50% more income?
Well, why?
Why? Good question. So one is that their energy costs are a quarter what they are in the UK because they've done things like fracking. So they've got cheap gas. That means their industry is competitive. It means that their households are paying a quarter of the energy bill that we're paying in the UK. And they've also got lower taxes, and they've also got less regulation. So they've got their industries like the tech industry, AI, their steel industry. All of those things are doing better than ours because those industries are competitive. And that's happened for 30 years. So these are the deep-seated problems of the British economy. That our energy is too expensive, that our taxes are too high, our regulation is too high. So this is what the media should actually be focusing on instead of just like nonsense about what did somebody spend on a chair, or what does Rachel Reeves plan this week, or what has she said. It's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. The fact is the country's going bankrupt. We've not been earning enough money as a country. As I say, we're earning 50% less per capita than the US is. And what I was trying to do in 2022 is fix that. I was trying to fix it, and I was sabotaged. And the situation 3 years down the track is now worse. And there's no signs that anybody is serious about making it better.
Well, let's focus on this then. How do we become more competitive? How does Britain save itself?
So, first of all, we've got to unleash our oil and gas industry, and we've got to get fracking. People I've spoken to suggest that we have enough gas underneath, and around the UK to become energy independent and to lower our gas prices. So that to me is a massive issue. Why is it that manufacturing is doing so badly? One of the main reasons is energy is so expensive. So we have to get fracking, and we have to unleash our oil and gas industry again. That was one of the main drivers of American economic growth over the past 20, 30 years. We've got to cut taxes. They're now above the Laffer curve. And what does that mean? It means we're actually bringing in less revenue than we otherwise would have done, because we're actually stopping economic growth, because companies don't want to locate in the UK. They don't want to expand their businesses in the UK because the taxes are so high and because they can compete elsewhere. And this has got even more acute in the modern era because people can work from home. Technology means you can run your business from anywhere. So people are leaving the UK at record rates. I think we've got more people leaving the UK than per capita than any other country in the world.
A millionaire that's every 45 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to get our taxes at a competitive level. And then we've got to rein in the state, which is, those are the three things we need to do. We need to sort out energy and regulations. We need to make our taxes competitive, and we need to rein in the size of the state. And this is things like benefits, migrant support, all of that stuff needs to be dealt with. Well, this is a massive task, by the way. I don't deny that.
Well, let's talk about the state, or more specifically, the deep state. You say the Bank of England sabotaged you. The Treasury, the civil service. Tell our viewers and listeners about this deep state and the people who really are controlling our governments.
I think it's important for people to understand, because people think the Prime Minister is all powerful or the Chancellor is all powerful and they can go into government and they can just pull the levers and things will happen. But actually, the government is controlled by the permanent bureaucracy, by the civil service. It's them who hire and fire the people that work in the government. They control the budgets of each government department. Okay. They make the decisions about how policies are implemented. So even if a policy has been signed off by a minister, it's a civil servant who says whether it's legal. It's a civil servant who implements it. It's a civil servant who signs off the budget for it. And that gives those people a lot of power. Mm-hmm. Now, the Bank of England governor has what I would describe as unaccountable power. He's appointed for 8 years. He can pretty much only be sacked for gross negligence. So he is able to make decisions about the economy independent of the elected government that have massive implications for people's lives. So what has happened, and it's got particularly bad in the last 30 years since Tony Blair got into office, is lots of power that used to sit in the hands of elected people now sits in the hands of the unelected. Mm-hmm. And they are making decisions about monetary policy. So what interest rates are, how much money the Bank of England prints. That's a decision the Bank of England essentially makes. They're making decisions about fiscal policy. So if you look at the budget coming up, you'll hear a lot about the Office of Budget Responsibility, the OBR.
Yeah.
They're the people that essentially set the tram lines which the Chancellor has to operate in. And the same is true, by the way, for things like migration. There's an independent government legal department that decides what's legal and what's illegal. They are the people who are saying, sorry, but you've got to put these migrants up at 4-star hotels. So what I'm saying is that this bureaucratic apparatus is there. It is essentially driving the decision-making of government, and ministers pretty much have to go along with it.
But with the Bank of England, though, for example, surely it's better. I would trust an expert in banking and finance than a politician.
Well, that makes you part of the globalist elite.
Oh,
basically,
wow.
JJ, you're part of the problem.
I'm part of the problem.
Because if you're basically saying you want the country run
by
unelected technocrats, you're not a Democrat. You're not a Democrat. You believe in unelected technocracy. It's a position, it's a point of view, but it's not democracy.
I just think...
no one voted for Andrew Bailey. I mean, by the way, he's not even a competent technocrat. He's an incompetent technocrat. But even if there were competent technocrats, the fact is, no one elected them. And if you just allow me to expand on this point.
Go on.
These are people, broadly speaking, the senior people in the Treasury, the senior people of the Bank of England. They believe in net zero.
Okay.
They believe in mass migration. They believe in Keynesian economics. They believe in high tax and high spend. Mm-hmm. They were responsible for printing vast amounts of money after the financial crisis during COVID that has inflated asset prices and made it very difficult for young people to get on in life. So they have a worldview. They're not neutral technocrats. Yeah. They have a worldview. And we can see this worldview emerge from time to time. So Bailey has recently criticised Brexit. He has promoted net zero. Mark Carney, who is the ultimate version of these people, made lots of money out of the whole climate change agenda, or what Donald Trump would call the climate change scam. He then went on to be Prime Minister of Canada and is busy ruining Canada's economy at the moment. So, these people are not neutral experts. They are people with an agenda who have huge amounts of unelected power. And what is going on in Britain is the public is incredibly frustrated by this because they keep voting for governments that limit immigration, for governments that want
lower taxes.
Want lower taxes.
Yeah.
And governments aren't delivering it. And you've got to ask, why is it that the public keep voting for lower taxes and lower immigration and politicians keep delivering the opposite? It's not because politicians are stupid. It's because they're part of this system which has a particular worldview. And you're essentially saying you prefer the worldview of these unelected technocrats to the worldview of the British people. I mean, that's what you're saying,
Liz,
JJ.
You sound like you've been listening to the Joe Rogan Experience far too much. That's what you sound like. This is what I'd like to see happen here, okay? I would say, okay, Liz Truss becomes Prime Minister. You then get to put in place the who's in charge of Bank of England, who's in charge of the Treasury, who's going to be heading up the civil service departments. That's what I think that should be happening.
Correct.
But I don't think it should be politicians put into those positions. I think it should be just the people who are best at those jobs.
Yeah, but who's deciding who's best?
Well, the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister should decide.
Then that is a political appointment, fine.
Yeah, but as long as it's not an actual politician.
But what's an actual politician
An
compared
MP.
to?
I don't want an MP running it. Like, we've got Rachel from Accounts now in charge of things.
She's not in charge. This is what I'm trying to say to you, JJ, that I'm no fan of hers whatsoever, but she is not dictating monetary and fiscal policy in this country. It's being run by the Bank of England governor. It's being run by the Office of Budget Responsibility. It's being run by the Treasury officials. And until people really understand what is going on and how the country operates, we're not going to fix it. That's what I'm saying to you. And even if somebody is bad, like Starmer or Reeves, they are elected. None of these other people have been elected and they can't be removed. That is the fundamental problem. And by the way, Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are fans of the unelected technocracy. These are, she worked at the Bank of England. We don't know exactly what job she did, but she worked at the Bank of England. Keir Starmer was head of the CPS. So these are people who are ingrained in that system and that way of thinking. But nevertheless, they are elected politicians. And we have a system in Britain where the unelected are far too powerful. And they get no accountability. They don't go on shows like this. They don't get questioned on Laurel Kuenssberg.
Yeah.
Even though, the Bank of England has failed at every single policy it's been responsible for. It failed at financial stability. It was its job to make sure things were stable in 2022. It didn't do that. It failed on the pensions industry. It's failed on inflation. Even though inflation is over target, the Bank of England still lowered interest rates. Why did they do that? They haven't been held to account for that. So these institutions are failing, and it's not limited to financial institutions. It's also true of the Climate Change Committee. It's also true of the Home Office. I mean, we've just seen failure after failure at the Home Office. Yet none of these people get sacked.
Yeah. So you agree with me, though, that we should have non-politicians, but they can be...
I just think it's your definition of politicians. So let's look at the American system where Donald Trump has brought in people like Elon Musk or like Scott Bessent who were involved in other jobs and are the best person for the job. That, to me, is a good system.
That's a good system.
But those people would be defined in America as politicians.
No,
because
I think they'd be defined as
Bessent
political appointments, not politicians.
We're just splitting hairs here. I think we're splitting hairs.
Well, let's say you've been given time to actually put your ideas into action. What would your vision of the country have been?
Well, first of all, we have to get out of our growth, our economic death spiral. We're in a death spiral that the country's bringing in less and less money. We're putting up taxes more and more. It's a doom loop because the more you put up taxes, the harder you make it to start a business, the lower the economic growth is, the less money is coming in. So my fundamental vision was to change that, to do things like get fracking, make it easier to build things in this country, lower taxes to attract business. You get the economy growing. You're bringing in more tax revenue, not because you put up tax rates, but because there's more activity. That's the tax revenue you want. Then you can actually use that revenue to improve public services. At the same time, you've got to cut out all of the waste, and you've got to, we've got to stop funding illegal asylum seekers to stay in hotels around Britain. We've got to deal with those things. So alongside that economic change, you also need to get rid of the rest of the Blairite legacy, the Human Rights Act, which means that illegal immigrants stay in this country. You need to get rid of the Equality Act, which has embedded DEI into everything we do. There's no worse crime in Britain, apparently, than being accused of being a racist. That is the worst possible crime you could commit in modern Britain. We have to take on that whole unelected bureaucracy that is driving our country into the ground. That's the bottom line. And what my plan was to do is to, in 2022, get the economy in the right direction so that we could put to the country in 2024 the really big changes we needed to make Britain great again. That's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And I was not able to even do the start of it because I was thwarted, not just by the Bank of England and the Treasury, but also by people in the Conservative Party who didn't want the country to change. And they still don't want the country to change because they're doing quite fine out of the country as it is.
Well, the markets were panicked, and as you say, you weren't even able to implement the plan.
When you say the markets were panicked, the markets were reacting to the Bank of England. Mm-hmm. What did the Bank of England do? It announced the sale of £40 billion of gilts the day before the mini-budget. Mm-hmm. Then it failed to properly regulate the pension industry. All these pension funds were caught having bet on interest rates being low forever, which they were never going to be. And the Bank of England had failed to properly supervise that, which was their job. And of course, one of the issues with the market reaction was the Bank of England is very powerful with the economic institutions. And they were there pointing the finger at me, pointing the finger at the mini-budget, rather than admitting what they'd done. You also had politicians in Parliament on the Conservative side deliberately trying to undermine me and saying that they wouldn't vote for fracking. They wouldn't vote for cuts in the welfare budget, which I was putting forward. So that made life very difficult. Fundamentally, if the mini-budget had had the support of all the Conservative MPs and it hadn't been undermined by the Bank of England, we'd be in a different position today. That's the situation. But there's very few people, lots of people sort of point a finger and say blah, blah, blah. But very few people argue that the policies were wrong. Mm-hmm. So the fundamental policy that I was forced to reverse by the OBR and the Bank of England was raising corporation tax from 19% to 25%. Mm-hmm. Raising corporation tax to 25% has been a disaster. It's been a disaster.
Yeah.
And yet people won't talk about that. So they won't talk about the policies in the budget. They'll just say, oh, well, you weren't in office for this much time, or
But this is the thing. I don't think your plan was wild and crazy, but the Bank of England were against it. You have conspirators, even in your own party, trying to thwart you.
Particularly in my own party.
So then, was it a case of? Is there any part of it where it's perhaps if you had communicated with these bad actors a little bit differently, that maybe you could have garnered some support?
Bad actors are bad actors. They don't sort of. You've got to understand that, and this is what people who want to change Britain have to understand, that there are powerful vested interests who don't want things to change, who benefit from the status quo, who actively promote the status quo. That is what the Bank of England are. We've got a governor who supports DEI, he supports net zero, he supports mass migration, he hates Brexit. That's his position. That is not just him, by the way, it is the whole institution is of that view. The whole Treasury is of that view. They don't want a successful Prime Minister who is going to implement policies to undermine that worldview. Likewise, in the Conservative Party, there were people in the Conservative Party who backed net zero, who didn't want fracking, who want to be part of the status quo. You might call it the uni party.
Well, why
They
are they
don't want change.
conservatives?
But the point is that these people, I couldn't go to them and say, change your entire worldview. They don't want to. This is, and they are busy. They have powerful positions with the press, with the media. The Bank of England is very powerful with the media.
Mm-hmm.
Media don't want to print any stories that are critical of the Bank of England. You will find that.
Not here. We're here. We
Well,
will
no,
print
but I'm
whatever we
just saying
want.
that's the general view.
Okay.
So these institutions carry a lot of power with the media. So if you're trying to communicate an alternative narrative, it is very difficult. And if you look at what happened to Trump in 2016 to 2020, he faced a lot of those issues because the mainstream media, the CNNs of this world, did not want to communicate that stuff, which is hence the importance of things like the Joe Rogan show in actually being able to get the message across. And we don't have enough independent media in Britain to be able to get the message across. But it's very important that people understand that these forces who don't want change aren't going away. They're still very, very powerful.
Well, we now have the Daily Expresso for you to.
Well, that's gonna break through.
It is. It absolutely will. Now, off the back of the reaction to the mini budget, you sacked Kwasi Kwarteng. You two were friends prior. I'm told he was your closest political ally. How difficult was that?
It was difficult. I mean, but I don't kind of want to get distracted into this personality Y or thing X. I mean, basically, we were put under immense pressure by the institutions, by the establishment who didn't want things to change. I tried to make the best decisions as I could to, first of all, try and get the change we needed. But when it became clear that that was going to be stopped, I did not want the country's economy to be in serious trouble. And I was being threatened indirectly by the governor of the Bank of England that we would not be able to finance government spending if I didn't make changes. I mean, that's so I was under massive pressure to do that. But it wasn't like, this isn't a personality issue about who I'm friends with or whatever. This is about how difficult it is in Britain to actually change the trajectory our country is on. And I did what I could at the time, but what I found were those forces were so powerful that they were able to absolutely steamroll me. That's what I found. And we have to, this is why at the start of this discussion, I went back to what the problem is in the country. We have a problem now with economic stagnation, now with mass migration. I'm also very concerned about the development of Islamism in our country. And yet we have an establishment that wants to deny any of these things are problems. They don't want to admit that the British economy is completely stagnant and our taxes are too high and our energy costs are far too high. We still get the hype from Ed Miliband that, net zero and green jobs are the answer. They don't want to admit that we've got a problem with Islamism and the grooming gangs, and this inquiry has become a complete fiasco. They don't want to lift up the bonnet on what's actually going on in our country, and which is why you get all the discussion about, were you sad to sack this person? Or it's just like, this is all just complete window dressing to a very, very serious failure of the state. That's what we have.
Well, what do you think about the grooming gang inquiry? It's a shambles. We've had 4 of the survivors saying they have quit and they're not going to return unless Jess Phillips steps down. Meanwhile, Starmer
Jess
is
Phillips
throwing his backing behind
an
her.
absolute, she's a complete disgrace. She has appeased Islamists, essentially for her own political reasons. We can see that in her Birmingham constituency. And she has also lost the trust of the victims of the grooming gangs. And she's said some absolutely terrible things. I mean, she should go. She's not the only problem. We have a system problem here that it's clear that local authorities, the police, possibly the Home Office, were complicit in what happened. And that is why I don't think it's just the Labour Party, and I do think they are beholden to the votes of people pushing the Islamist agenda. I think that is a big problem. But I don't think it's just them. I think it is the state itself who have covered it up. And it's absolutely horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous.
Well, we've seen Sadiq Khan be questioned at the London Assembly many times about grooming gangs in London. He belligerently dismisses the questions. Thanks to the Daily Express's expose on London grooming gangs, the Met are now going to reinvestigate all of the alleged cases of it. But why does it take the force of a national newspaper to force a police institution into simply doing their actual job?
Because the police are completely unaccountable. Completely unaccountable. I mean, everything I've just been saying about the Bank of England governor goes for the...
Mark Rowley.
Yeah, Mark Rowley. It goes for the chief constables. You know, we've seen the same issues with the chief constable of the West Midlands. They are not held to account. They have been captured by the DEI agenda in many cases. They've been captured by the transgender ideology as well. I mean, if you look at the arrest of Graham Lineman at Heathrow Airport for tweeting something about, I don't even know what it was about, but it upset trans activists, so he got arrested. I mean, it was absolutely crazy. And by the way, I mean, people overseas think, what the hell is going on in Britain? You know, why are comedians being arrested at the airport? I mean, you're laughing, but it's like, it's Soviet Union stuff. I mean, it's just absolutely not. So the police are not sufficiently accountable, and they use the excuse of operational independence to be able to pursue their own agenda. And I think that is a huge problem. And they've become increasingly out of touch with public priorities. Increasingly out of touch with public priorities. And we've also got a problem with the judiciary. And this was yet another thing that Blair did. Back in 2005, he made the judiciary unaccountable. He got rid of the role of the Lord Chancellor, who sat in cabinet, who was the most senior judge. He was responsible for appointing senior judges. Blair got rid of that. Instead, there's now a quango that appoint the judges.
Yep.
If you want to get ahead, you have to go along with all the politically correct DEI, pro-migration stuff. That's the way you get ahead now in the judiciary. So we have a big problem with all of this. And that's why I was saying, you know, you were asking me what my vision is for the country. Well, my vision is that we need to make our country great again. We need to restore ourselves, not just our economy, but also our culture, our spirit as a nation. There's a hell of a lot of roadblocks in the way of doing that, because many of which have been set up by Blair.
Are there any national institutions that you trust, or are they all the same?
Well, I was going to mention the Church of England. I mean, they've gone off the rails as well. The BBC, we don't even go there. It's so bad. Pretty much. I mean, what the left have done, and they started with the universities. They started with the universities, but they've been very successful at entryism into institutions. They've been very successful, and now pretty much every institution is captured. And this is why we need to set up new institutions. I can't think of an institution. Maybe you can think of one. I think
RNLI?
There are elements
National Trust?
Well, definitely not the National Trust. They've definitely been captured. But there are elements of, for example, the armed forces, or you might say, haven't been captured. But it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Well,
you're laughing, but I think it's so serious.
Oh, listen,
I think it's so serious.
Well, you spend a lot of time in America. What do they think about the country?
Well, they've had their own battles, and of course, in New York, Mandami, who is a nutty communist Islamist, is about to be elected as mayor of that city. So they are not immune from this capture of the extreme left, but they do take free speech very seriously, and they are horrified by what's going on in Britain. We invented free speech. In 1695, we created the concept of freedom of the press. Mm-hmm. And it was, people from England and Britain essentially going to America, helping write the Bill of Rights Constitution. They are shocked by what's happened in our country. And, it is appalling. People are their homes are being raided at night. Journalists are being chased up by the police on their doorstep about things they've been posting online. And I just think because we're here, we've kind of like the frog that's been boiled. We've kind of become inured to this kind of thing. Yeah. And we think it's become normalized. Yeah. But over there, they're like, is it really true? That's what people keep asking. Is it really true? So I would say, yeah, it is true. Yes, we do live in a sort of Stalinist state, a sort of incompetent Stalinist state.
Well, what about Nigel Farage? He says he'll finish the job that the Tories failed to do. Do you think he genuinely can become the next Prime Minister?
Well, I think it's interesting he finished it. I'm not sure the Conservatives started the job. I think that we don't know, and 4 years is a long time in politics. If you think, I was just reflecting where America was 4 years before the 2024 election. Nobody, or very few people, understood the likelihood of Donald Trump being re-elected as president. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 4 years. What I do know that if Nigel Farage gets elected and he doesn't reverse those the Blair takeover, if he doesn't reverse the Blair takeover, then nothing will change. That's absolutely critical, that anybody becoming Prime Minister needs to reverse the Blair takeover. I mean, Blair was the last Prime Minister that actually ran this country. Yeah. Ever since, most of it has been outsourced.
Okay. Well, on Farage, would you ever consider joining Reform?
I'm not focused on, political parties. What I'm focused on is the ideas we need to actually change our country, because I think there's been too much focus on the kind of he said, she said political space. Meanwhile, the unelected bureaucracy have just increased their power in every possible way.
What about frontline politics? Would you ever want to make a return to that?
I don't rule out doing anything. I'm not going to rule out doing anything. But I'm enjoying not being in it at the moment. Yeah. It's quite enjoyable. When I see other people having to go to the events that I no longer have to go to, I think it is a huge relief, because a lot of politics is quite performative. Okay. And that's not actually what I enjoy. Mm-hmm. I enjoy discussing how we change our country. And so there's lots of it I don't miss. But I was always prepared to do it because I cared about the future of the country. But there's a lot of, the House of Commons stuff that I really find just beyond interminable.
Fair. What about the Tories? I think as a party, they're finished now.
It's very difficult. And I think that the Conservatives... So I think things started going wrong for the Conservatives long before the Cameron government. Oh. It was when Conservatives accepted Blairism and when Cameron said, I want to be the heir to Blair, that's when we failed to actually take on the sort of human rights agenda, the equality agenda, all of that stuff that Blair did, we failed to take it on. And that was quite a long time ago. And I think in order for the Conservative Party to revive, it needs to say that was the wrong turn. Really what happened was wrong. Mm-hmm. We failed to do what we ought to have done in office. And I haven't seen that yet from Kemi Badenoch. And I haven't even seen it from people like Jenrick. Jenrick said some good things. I agree with what he said on the judiciary. But he's not actually saying we need to reverse the Bank of England Act, which I think has been incredibly important in helping destroy our economy. Yeah. They're not prepared to really say Blairism was a massive mistake for the country. Okay.
Well, on Kemi, is she the right leader for the party at the moment? We had her on this show. She seems to have a plan. She's very direct in
But as I said, she's not actually said we need to reverse the Blairite.
So that's the
the
main thing for you.
That's the thing for me. If Kemi Badenoch said, yes, it was wrong for Blair to make the Bank of England unaccountable. He introduced this human rights legislation which has stymied our ability to control who's in our country. If she started taking on those type of issues, I would be interested. But at present, there is still too many people involved in the Conservative Party, the so-called modernisers, people like Gove and all these people who basically were the architects of the Conservative failure. So until she actually repudiates that agenda, I don't think the Conservative Party has got much future.
Okay, well, in the polls, the Greens are surging, Reform are surging, Labour slumping.
You see,
Tories
people
slumping.
aren't happy with your technocrat friends. This is what's going on. It's an anti-JJ movement. This when you talked about the experts, this is what the public are fed up with, because they actually think these people aren't experts, and they're right. They think Andrew Bailey is not an expert on how to run the economy. They think that the Mark Rowley is not an expert on policing in London. This is what they think. These experts are actually not very good.
Well, you've answered my question for me. You answered the question for me there. Right, Liz, I want to talk to you about Liz the person, not the politician, not the former Prime Minister. That's what this podcast is all about, meeting the real people. We've done the business side of things. Now I want to talk about the real you.
We spent a lot of time on the business side
We
of
did.
things.
What is something about Liz Truss the person that may surprise people?
I don't think there's anything people don't know about me.
Oh,
to be
really?
honest. Yeah, I can't think of anything.
What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun?
Yeah. Do you sit at home and watch Netflix with a bottle of red? Do you prefer going out for walks? Do you run through fields
I'm
of
quite
corn?
enjoying the traitors. I'm quite enjoying
Celebrity
the traitors.
Yeah,
but I'm just catching up, so do not tell me what's
happened.
happened.
I've been trying
to avoid any spoilers while I'm in the US. So I like that.
Would you ever do reality TV? You'd be great on the traitors.
I don't want to do that.
No. We won't see you in the jungle sometime soon.
That sounds horrific. That sounds absolutely horrific. I don't. What else am I? What else do I do? I do enjoy walking. I've just taken up golf, which I've become a golf ball.
Any good?
No.
I tried it. It's not for me. It's not for me.
Really?
Yeah.
I quite enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The social aspect of it, drinking at every hole.
No, not like kind of. It's more the challenge of it.
Now, a lot of people say that Starmer basically has zero principles. He says one thing, then changes his mind, does another. What are some of the key principles that have guided your career?
So my fundamental belief is that people are best at making their own decisions, not the government, and that is what I think has gone so wrong. Is that so much thinking has been outsourced.
Yeah,
and I believe in freedom. I believe in this country. I'm a patriot. That's probably the things that guide my thinking most. So
this week in my column for the Daily Express, I wrote about churches in this country, the decline of churches, how they're being turned into bars, into flats, into mosques, and how we need to preserve our churches and get people back in to church.
With you.
Yeah, I think it's fundamental for the family unit in this country to have a strong religion.
I think the family has also been under attack by the welfare state. I think that has been, is taken a role of families in many ways. Yeah. And that's been a huge problem. And actively encouraging essentially families not to be together. I think I am more optimistic about the church, which is I think that church attendance is going up, and it's particularly going up amongst Gen Z. Yeah. So we are seeing, but the Church of England. So I'm a Church of England person, but I think it's just gone in completely the wrong direction.
Well, I'm a Catholic.
So I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. I keep. You're not the first Catholic who said that to me. Yeah. I want to see a revived Church of England. Yeah. I want to see a revived Church of England. That's what I want to see. And I want to see, I completely agree with you, our great church is back in use. Yeah, absolutely. Our great church is back in use. Yeah. Starmer says it's unpatriotic for people like Nigel Farage, who may be the next Prime Minister. He says it's not patriotic for Farage to go to America and slag off the UK and tell America how bad it is over here. Do you agree, or is this going to be defended by freedom of speech? Well, I mean, Keir Starmer lecturing people about being unpatriotic is a joke, isn't it? I mean, the guy is he comes from the strand of left-wing thinking that hates our country, that loves international institutions like the UN, international law, the EU. That is Starmer. He hates our country, and he comes from a long line of the left who think that way. So it's a bit of a cheek, him saying that. I think we need America's help.
Okay.
I think we need America's help. That I think we've lost our way as a country. That they, with the Trump revolution, have, found a new path. Yes, there are threats in America. I talked about Mandami. They have a problem with Islamism as well, but they are grappling with it. So I want their help. I'm not ashamed about asking them. I see America as one of Britain's great inventions. We look at the ideas. Look at the ideas. They hate it when I say that, but look at the ideas. They came from here.
Yeah.
They came from here. So, in our hour of need, which I think we are in, when we are talking about these ancient British liberties like free speech, property rights, these kind of things that have been diminished in our country, why shouldn't we go to the Americans and say we're in trouble? Why shouldn't we?
I love that you say that America's one of our inventions. That's fantastic. They will hate that. American viewers are going to despise that comment, but I like it. That's very good.
They did a bit of work on it. But things like even the right to bear arms. There was the right to bear arms in Anglo-Saxon England.
Yeah.
That's where it came from.
So, perfect. I can't wait for Trump to see this. He's going to love that line. What's the most unfair thing you think's ever been said about you?
Oh my God. I mean, how on earth could I start with that? How on earth could I start?
If you go back to 3 years ago and the Daily Star did the Who Will Last Longer, Liz or the Lettuce, how did that feel at the time? Did it
I
upset
wasn't
you,
actually. Or? The thing is, I was not reading the press because I just don't think you can, because it's a massive.
Yeah.
It's just a difficult thing to take on with all the stuff that was going on. I mean, I think it's this discussion about how long I was in office. If I'd simply been incompetent automaton, I wouldn't have been removed from office.
Yeah.
There've been plenty of those people who've lasted for ages.
Yeah.
I think it was because I was a threat. I think it was because I was a threat. Why was it that parts of the Conservative Party wanted to install Rishi Sunak? Answer is he was going to do absolutely nothing, which is what they wanted.
Yeah. Fair.
So
I think politics is probably the most poisonous profession to get into in terms of how.
Well, you're in journalism, so that's pretty bad.
Yeah, no, but I mean,
I think academia is brutal as well. Actually, I think university people are incredibly bitchy about each other.
Well, I think in terms of the public being like hating politicians and giving their views.
We've just established that you're the person egging them on by saying
No!
You want to get rid of politicians and install all these technocrats. That's what you said earlier in this discussion.
I said politicians should appoint those people as positions, but regardless, I can't. If my son, for example, said to me, "I want to be an MP," I'd say absolutely not, because it's too intrusive. People are going to tear you apart. Whether you do good, whether you do bad, people are going to have an opinion, and it's often going to be upsetting.
But I don't think you should live your life by what other people think about you. Well, that's like a fundamental principle.
Yeah, no.
Like there are some people I care about their opinion.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people I don't care what they think about me at all. Yeah, I don't care because they're.
But you said, for example, you go into work and you've got your own Tory colleagues who are gunning for you.
Yeah, that wasn't very nice.
Yeah, that's not the kind of workplace I'd like to be in.
True,
and that's how I feel it is in politics.
That's why the Tory party is in such trouble, because it became internally corrupt and toxic. That's the problem.
Yeah,
and it wasn't. It was no longer a fighting force for principles that we believe in, like patriotism, freedom.
Yeah.
It became a toxic bunch of snaky backstabbers. And yeah, I agree with that. But that politics does degenerate into that, and you can see the Labour Party degenerating into that.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be like that. And if we want to fix our country, it can't be like that. So I'm a terrible optimist, but I'm sort of optimistic, and I believe it has to happen. There has to be a force that's more than just, petty backstabbing and snakery. There has to be, doesn't there? Otherwise, this country is done.
Yeah. If you could give yourself advice for day one as Prime Minister, what would it have been?
Well, the advice I had before running was from my husband, which is don't run because it's a toxic cesspool.
So he agrees with me.
They've already got rid of Boris.
Yeah.
They're just going to get rid of you.
Husband's a smart man.
He's a smart man, but it's like people telling you not to put your finger in the fire, isn't it? Or don't press the red button. It's sort of it's I think though, the way I look at it is, I'd spent 10 years as a minister and a cabinet minister, and I'd understood how the system worked to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
But it was only when I got to the top and I saw the sheer power of the unelected bureaucrats and how they connived with the mainstream media and elements of the Conservative Party that I understood really why our country was in the state it was in. Because previously I just thought that this Prime Minister or that Prime Minister isn't tough enough, they're not willing to make difficult decisions. Mm-hmm. I hadn't understood that actually when you try and do things, the sheer level of the backlash.
Yeah.
The fact that I could be removed within that time period, tells you what you need to know about how broken our system is. So I think I did learn from that, and I hope other people learn from what happened. And lots of people want to say, oh well, if you'd done things differently, would things have been different? And my point is that only if I hadn't done anything.
Yeah.
Because we go back to this point, the electorate keeps voting for low taxes and controlled immigration and not getting it. Why is that?
Yeah.
And I think my time in office helps explain why that is. Mm-hmm. The very powerful forces that stop it from happening.
Okay. How would you like to be remembered? I'm sure you've got plenty more.
I'm not dead
I
yet.
know.
God's
It
sake,
sounds morbid.
I don't want to be...
You've got plenty more time.
No,
I know.
exactly. I don't. It's terrible. What would you like on your tombstone?
Yeah, what would you like on your tombstone, Liz? All right. Describe these political figures for me in one word. Nice and easy.
This is not nice and easy, is it?
Rory Stewart.
Wet.
Donald Trump.
Great.
Kamala Harris.
Over.
Nigel Farage.
Potential.
Sadiq Khan.
Corrupt.
Rachel Reeves.
Autopen.
Kemi Badenoch.
Potential.
Ed Davey.
Stupid.
Elon Musk.
Inspirational.
Keir Starmer.
Lawyer.
And finally, Liz Truss.
That's the hardest one.
Yeah.
Still alive.
To be continued. Well, Liz, thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
time today.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
That is all for today's very special episode of the Daily Expresso. Thank you for watching. Leave your comments below, like and subscribe, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.